pleased to see that he and I are thinking so much alike, and I think it's simply common sense. In the times when it first signaled that it was going to be a huge problem, not just to California, but to the rest of the country, I was at pains to point out that the federal government had the responsibility under the Constitution for securing the borders. The mayor has said securing the borders and securing our national security at home are inseparable. He's absolutely right. And wholly apart from the security issue, which is one that you cannot ignore. What was clear 10 years ago, 20 years ago, was that if the federal government continued to default on its responsibility, and it has, then the problem was not going to be California's alone. It would spill over into the South, into the Midwest, and that's happened. And the number of illegal immigrants in this country now is tripled by most conventional estimates. That's not a good thing for security. It's not a good thing for the country. One of the things that the mayor has stressed that I respond to strongly is that it is wrong to simply allow people to come into the country illegally and remain un-American while we're asking people who want to come and become citizens and go through the process of naturalization to wait in line for years outside embassies in Mexico and elsewhere. He's right. The way to become an American is not necessarily to be born here, but to come, be naturalized, learn the language so that you're not relegated to second-class citizenship, and so that you take part, that you participate, assume the duties, not just the right to earn a paycheck.
Mayor, back in 1994, Prop 187.
What?
I think you remember that. And how do you feel about providing education and welfare and benefits to illegal immigrants? Governor Wilson is remembered for Prop 187.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you, Mr. Mayor. Back in '94,
I can do two in one.
You were
Same question.
This just piggybacks on his, just to add to it. Back in '94, you were critical of Prop 187. You called it mindless. Has your view changed on that at all, or?
The governor and I agree on most things. And this is a good place to remind ourselves, California, that my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. I bet with Governor Wilson it's more like 90-10, maybe even 95-5. We end up maybe with somewhat the same experiences and then somewhat different experiences. The simple fact is we end up in the same place right now. And the same place right now is it's my second of my 12 commitments to the American people, which indicates how important it is. We have to end illegal immigration. And we have to stop it mainly at the border. Because once it spills over, you get close to not being able to stop it. That's the point that I was making back then, although there were some disagreements on certain things. That's the point the governor was making back then. Maybe we saw it somewhat differently. But the end result is we have to stop illegal immigration. We have to make sure that everybody that comes into this country is identified. We have to stop it, and I've gone into great detail about how to do that with a physical fence, a technological fence, border patrol stations along the border. There's just a piece on television this morning that I woke up to about the Canadian border and the risk of terrorists coming across the Canadian border. That has to be secured. You need a tamper-proof ID card, and you need an Americanization program like the governor is talking about, meaning to become a citizen, you have to read English, write English, speak English. If we do that, and the federal government meets its responsibility, about which even going back to what you were talking about, the governor and I were in agreement on that the federal government was not meeting at all, even close to its responsibilities of securing the border, and we were both quite upset about that. If the federal government can meet that responsibility, then in the way the governor is talking about, we could expand legal immigration.
Do you still oppose 187?
It's part of, whatever position I took then. That's part of history. It's not part of what's going on right now. It's part of how we got to where we are. The governor had one view on it, I had a different view on it. But the simple fact is, we now end up in the same position.
I think the
same
question,
emphasis.
the question may be, how do you feel about public